Something I want to ask, and I guess again I'm going to preface this by the fact that I'm in no means a therapist, right? Okay,
Yeah.
and I don't want to like go digging in places that
hmm
like there's no need to be. But do you ever wonder in terms of an anxious attachments type, in terms of maybe feeling like people might leave? Do you think there's anything to do with maybe your dad in
Yeah,
there?
yeah. Last year, I then had a living situation, and the domino effect was that basically I was left in a lot of financial situation at no fault of my own,
Yeah,
and it just sort of sent me off on one alongside maybe partying a little bit too hard at the time as well.
yeah,
We're all guilty of it, but yeah, it was after summer. I sort of just had a massive breakdown at work, quit my job,
yeah.
and so basically my whole life just became centered around this medication, and that's why I decided that I needed to stop taking it. And since then, I've taken it twice, and it's worked perfectly.
Welcome to the third episode of Let's Talk Mental Health. And today the focus is going to be a bit of anxiety, bit of depression. I've got Jordan here, another person who went to our school, and something I started to realize just before I filmed this is our generation was really cooked. Like the amount of people who have been to my school have issues and are just happy to come on the podcast is quite amazing so far. Um, but yeah, we're just going to get into some questions. And the first thing I want to ask is, how are you today?
Yeah, no, I'm all right. I'm pretty
Good.
good. I'm just like boiling hot. Obviously, it's
Boiling hot.
melting
It
outside.
is boiling hot. It's insane.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, let's jump right into it. So first off, what would you say if you could just sum it up? What you struggle with, or what you have struggled with in the past?
Um, I mean, primarily, I think it's just around like anxiety and depression, stuff like that. Like, I've had a lot of previous experiences where, primarily now, it's a lot more to do with sort of like physical symptoms.
Yeah,
When I was a little bit younger, I think it was a lot more focused around sort of mentally trying to battle these new things that came into play.
yeah,
Um, and that was obviously something that took quite a lot of sort of time out, self growth, and reflection and stuff like that. But as a whole, yeah, I mean, sort of symptoms wise, do you mean
yeah. Go
things
anything really.
like sort of quite bad heart palpitations? I get
Yeah,
struggle sleeping. I used to have it a lot more so than I do now, but
yeah.
something that like sort of meditation and stuff has definitely helped with that.
Meditation is
Um,
good. That's something I've done myself
yeah,
at times.
it's definitely something, and like mindfulness, that's great.
Yeah,
It's definitely something that I've used before. It's just low mood and stuff like that. I think one of the major things I struggle with is quite bad mood swings, and also just not being able to really deal with a lot of like external stresses.
yeah.
Definitely something I get very worked up. I can't sort of break things down as such, um, and it's just like overload of stress.
Does it feel like a almost like quite a low tolerance to taking things on, to the to stress things can bring you?
Yeah. Definitely. It's like any little thing would just build up, and it would be like the final straw, and then
Yeah,
I would
the
sort of
bucket.
catastrophize and
Yeah,
think that like my life was coming to like an end,
yeah,
and it would just be like, yeah, just the smallest of little things would just be really triggering, particularly sort of things to do with like finances and stuff
yeah.
like that that
Of
I've
course.
dealt with previously. Um, and I think, as I said, that the mood swings was really difficult because one day I'd wake up and it would be um, like I'd feel like I'm on top of the world and like quite a lot of euphoria,
Yeah,
and then the next day I wake up and I just feel like my whole world is crashing down. And I would always try and pinpoint what it was
yeah.
and try and work out exactly what was making me feel that way. When actually I think one of the things that I've learned is that there's not always going to be something,
Yeah.
not always going to be a reason for that. It's just you're going to have the down days and you're going to have the up days.
Yeah, which interestingly, on the last podcast we did, which actually, as we're filming this, was only 2 days ago, but I think they're going to be about 3 weeks apart. Um, one of the one of the big things that Grace spoke about was those huge ups and those
Mm,
huge downs, to the point where she had doctors that thought she had bipolar.
mm.
Turned out to be borderline personality, and apparently, as she explained, that's a thing of like just going from 0 to 100 really quickly,
Yeah.
and then kind of just going back. Hey guys, sorry to pause the video, but I just wanted to say if you're enjoying it, please like and subscribe so you see the new podcast episodes, and comment down below what you thought of this episode. Cheers. But yeah, it's really good. I want to go back a bit, right, to sort of getting diagnosed. So you're diagnosed with anxiety and depression, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
they were diagnosed at separate times.
yeah. Completely separate times. Anxiety was a good. I'm trying to think how old I am. Yeah, a good like 4 years, 4 years ago, I think now.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and I think it was as a result of going away to university actually,
Mm.
and then obviously COVID happening,
Yeah.
and then I had some situations where I fell out with a lot of close family, which then had a knock on impact to sort of my living situation and so on and so forth. But at that time, that's when I chose to go and sort of speak to the doctor and say, look, like something's not up.
Yeah.
It also goes hand in hand because I have quite a lot of health anxiety as well.
Right. Okay.
So I always think that like, yeah, something's going to go on, or like, yeah, like I don't really know much about that side of it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something that sort of goes with it. But yeah, I went to the doctors and they actually put me on propanolol.
Yeah. I
Now I
remember
can't
this.
remember exactly the strength. I think I'd spoke to you sort of previously. I think
Yeah. You were on a you're on like a daily dose of it, weren't you?
yeah,
So you're on it like twice or three times a day.
yeah, twice I think, and
Twice
then
a
I
day.
started taking it 3 times a day, and they were like, "You should not be doing that." I was like,
Yeah.
"Oop."
So from what I remember,
Yeah,
um, you're on a slight, probably a bit of a higher dose because
yeah.
normally it's about 10 to 40 milligrams.
I think it was 50.
Was it 50?
I think it might have been
Yeah,
40 or 50.
maybe if you're taking it only twice a day, the doses might have been a bit higher. But generally, when you take it, because I still have it prescribed, I haven't used it in a couple of years,
Yeah,
but
yeah, same here.
it tends to be, I must have got like maybe 10, 20 milligrams at first, but like I feel like once you take that a couple of times, the only thing that then sort of makes any difference is 40 milligrams.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
any
yeah,
time I took it as a PRN or an as needed medication, I took 40 milligrams. But like weirdly, I had times when I thought, holy shit, it's just like taken away any kind of anxiety I feel.
mm.
Then it had times that I was like, okay, that somehow made me feel worse because it got to a point where it started making my chest feel quite tight.
Yeah,
And obviously it does. It obviously works on your heart, doesn't it? It's supposed
yeah,
to slow your heart rate
yeah.
down.
Beta blocker.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I never got on with it in the end,
It
really.
was it was similar for me actually, and the reason that I stopped taking it, so I was taking it for about a year or two, but I started noticing that I was becoming very fixated around it. When I could take it, would it be before bed? Would it be before I drank alcohol with friends?
Yeah,
Would it be before I had a cigarette? Like,
you
because
got to the
then my
point of
heart would spike and I'd get fixated, and then I'd start having an internal meltdown
yeah,
over the fact that I couldn't take another beta blocker because I'd just taken one.
yeah, yeah,
And so basically, my whole life just became centered around this medication. And that's why I decided that I needed to stop taking it. And since then, I've taken it twice and it's worked perfectly. But I think it's very focused on, I don't know, physical rather than like the
yeah.
mental
It's
side of
well,
it.
I
So,
think in terms of like psychology wise, I mean, obviously it's debatable what you actually
yeah,
call psychology, but in terms of your brain chemicals, I don't think it's doing anything.
yeah,
But I think it can block the action of adrenaline and stuff like that, just to, when you're feeling really anxious, to stop your heart going really fast
yeah, I
and
agree.
kind of, yeah, just chilling your body out. That was another thing that I used to have. Weirdly, I had a heart rate that sat at about 40. Like it constantly sat at about 40. It was always, I think it was always really strange. Like they were like, okay, why do you have such a low heart rate considering you're anxious all the time? But for me, it was like, it was this really mental thing. And like I wouldn't feel it in my body, really. Like all those physical symptoms that people talked about, I would never really get. Like I'd be sat here, wouldn't be sweating, wouldn't be like feeling hot. My heart wouldn't be racing, but I'd feel like I was about to have a panic attack. Like it was
Mm,
that kind of thing.
mm,
Um, so I think that's probably why they weren't too beneficial to me. But if you're someone who feels anxiety really strong in your body, they can be good at like chilling your body out
yeah,
and that having a knock-on effect to your brain to stop you just kind of like falling into the pit really of anxiety.
yeah. It's like a spiral,
Um,
isn't it?
yeah, exactly. So if we go back a bit, so You were diagnosed with anxiety. Do you know at what age it was?
About 20, it must have been.
About 20. Okay. And do you remember the thoughts you had around that? Was it validating? Was it scary? Like, what were your
I
immediate
mean, it
reactions?
was not really anything that I didn't already know.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
it was just, I think, maybe overwhelming for a moment just to say that you can put like a label on that,
Yeah.
and say, oh, that's what I'm experiencing right now, or I'm that sort of person. I think it's difficult because ultimately I didn't sort of want to let it define me as like a social thing, or like I've got sort of social anxiety, or I've got like internal anxiety or health anxiety or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where I was like, okay, now how do I try and like manage that and mitigate that? Still not mastered it to this day,
Yeah.
but you know,
Me neither, mate.
on sort of like a day to day basis, we're going pretty well. I think, yeah, obviously it was very validating just to say
Yeah.
like what everything that I'm thinking is true, because I think one of my main things is, you know, you sort of experience that thought, feeling, emotion, whatever it may be, and then after you almost sometimes think that you've just like been a drama queen, or
Yeah.
like you've
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
overreacted and that
Yeah.
it's all in your head, or that you're crazy or something like that. And I think that that was definitely something that it helped. It
Yeah.
reassured me just in the sense of, you know, you're not a crazy bitch.
Yeah. You're just struggling with something specific.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay, so if we then sort of fast forward to what led up to getting a depression diagnosis and when that was and how that felt.
Yeah, I mean, the depression was something that I was a little bit more hesitant to believe. I think it's got a very bad stigma. When I was
Mm.
younger, I was very, that's not me. You know, I want to be the happy person, the life of the party. I want
Yeah.
to be smiley, bubbly. And so I think it was definitely something I was a little bit in denial about for probably quite a few years. Probably, I mean, it came into play, I think, probably at the same time as anxiety, but I was trying to work out exactly, you know, trying to put a name to it. Um, and then, yeah, I'd say after a number of years of dealing with sort of financial situations, and sort of breakdowns of families and relationships quite consistently, um, last year I then had a living situation, and the domino effect was that basically I was left in a lot financial situation at no fault of my own,
Yeah.
and it just sort of sent me off on one, alongside maybe partying a little bit too hard at the time as well.
Yeah.
We're all guilty of it, but yeah, it was after summer. I sort of just had a massive breakdown at work, quit my job, um,
And that was
got
was that when you were working at the psychiatric ward?
no, that was actually when I was working in finance. I
Right.
did have a
Okay.
breakdown the year before, but that was because of a relationship breakdown.
Right. Okay. I
But
remember.
no,
Yeah.
too many things.
Yeah.
But no, the last year was like properly when that sort of the depression fell into play, I think. And unfortunately, I did get quite suicidal, and
Mm.
um, I had very intrusive thoughts, which I'd never really experienced before. So it was something that was a bit newer to me, and that was when I realised, like, okay, this could really continue progressing if you don't sort of
Yeah.
go the right way about it. So I sort of took the time out. I took about a month out, went to the doctors, and started some new medication actually, um, to Citalopram.
Yeah.
Previously, I've tried to go on sertraline, and this was a couple of years ago. Um, I
Flies.
know.
They're everywhere.
And I tried to go to, yeah, I tried sertraline. It
Mm.
gave me a really bad reaction.
Right.
Um,
In what, the first kind of few weeks or?
yeah, like I only took it for about a week, and it just gave me like the flu. Like it made me
Mm.
feel like I was going to be sick, like
Yeah,
really
that's
nauseous.
what I was like on sertraline.
And I was just like, absolutely not. When they tried citalopram, so they basically tried to, no, they basically tried to sort of prescribe it to me for the last couple of years, and because of my mindset on medication from when I was younger, I don't like having to rely on something like that.
Of course, yeah.
Um, it means that I was very, yeah, very against it. And then when the sort of intrusive thoughts and stuff started happening, I thought something has to change. And then I tried the citalopram, and actually it was probably one of the best decisions that I ever made.
Yeah,
It's yeah.
that's good. Their antidepressants are double-edged sword, really.
Mm.
Like I was on sertraline for basically spent 3 weeks when I started it going through absolute hell. But I stuck through because everyone online was like, yeah, the first couple of weeks were rough and then it kind of balanced out. So I was like, okay, I just want to get through. I was so desperate for something to help me. So I persevered and it did settle down, but I was then on it for another year, and I can't say it helped me in that year at all.
Mm.
But I had doctors saying, yeah, it might take up to 12 weeks. I was like, 12 fucking weeks for
And
a
that's
drug
12
that I put in
weeks.
my system. Like that's insane. But yeah, I stayed on a year until I was like confident enough to say, okay, this definitely isn't working for me.
Yeah.
And then I came off it. But I find what's quite fascinating as well. So SSRIs, right, which citalopram is, sertraline is.
Mm-hmm.
They're all SSRIs. They all in theory do pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what the difference is because there's clearly a difference because they react very differently for
Yeah,
different
completely
people.
differently.
But yeah, it seems kind of odd when they do mostly the same thing. It's actually gonna make it look like we live in some sort of like some sort of like crack house
It
with fucking
actually
flies
does.
everywhere, man. Okay, so yeah, I want to talk a bit about. So you've talked a bit about symptoms,
Mm.
and stuff. I want to talk a bit about how the symptoms you experience affect the relationships you have with other people first.
Mm.
That's the main thing I want to talk about.
Yeah.
And then I want to talk a bit about how it affects work, and we'll go back to working in a psychiatric ward and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So first, relationships. How do you think it affects your relationships?
As a result of the sort of obviously the symptoms and the mindsets that I get sometimes, it's definitely had an impact on sort of relationships.
Yeah.
Like sort of serious relationships. I struggle quite a lot with. I don't like, yeah, like long term relationships. I don't have a lot of trust and stuff like that. I think that's as a result of the anxiety, like the anxious thoughts tend to spiral, and I think it's reflected quite significantly in my relationships in comparison to a lot of other areas of my life. That's something that I'm yet to sort of master, I think, and
Yeah.
yeah, but we continue to try and like grow and learn. In regards to family, I mean, it's definitely had times where it's put them in a bit of an awkward situation. I mean, I've moved back home a few times with my mum, and I'm very lucky to have quite supportive family. But my family is very small. It's literally that of about sort of 3-4 people, and I mean that's how I sort of like it. But yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. It's definitely enhanced the relationship that I have with my family now. Unfortunately, I mean, there's sort of a few situations with my siblings who are now experiencing similar things to what I am, and it's nice to know that I can sort of talk from a first-hand
I
perspective,
didn't know that actually.
and sort of assist, and hopefully they will at some point or another sort of understand that they're not on their own and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it has its pros, it has its cons. I think it's definitely put a lot of strain on when I was in a long-term relationship.
Mm.
It was horrific, and yeah, I shouldn't have been in that relationship, I don't think, to be honest,
Right.
just with the mindset that I was in.
Can you elaborate on that anymore?
I mean, it made me very. I would just get very insecure.
What, like, and did that come out in like jealousy, stuff
Yeah,
like that?
jealousy.
Yeah.
I just would have these like overwhelming thoughts that something like I knew that something was going on, and that I didn't know. Yeah, it was just like complete. I don't really know how to describe it. Lack of trust, like lack of trust in other people. But yeah, it was just uncontrollable. It would just spiral from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. I'd get highly anxious. It would trigger everything to do with that. And I just sort of get a lot of brain fog and literally feel like my brain was fried, like fried to bits.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really be able to think. I'd be very, what's the word? When you're like very,
Well,
when you're like impulsive. That's it.
right, yeah.
Very,
Impulsive.
very impulsive. And I wasn't really thinking about the long term. I'd just be thinking about how I was feeling right there and then.
Yeah. Okay. And so what about friendships? Because obviously I know you've always been a very social person.
Mm.
Um, do you think the anxiety and the depression got in the way of that at any point, or
It definitely does. Like it still does. It does in a sense of what I find now. I have to take my time away. My social battery is next to none,
yeah,
and I require a lot of time on my own, which is something that I've worked on. Didn't used to spending time on my own. Now I thrive in my own company,
yeah,
and that's
that's what
taken a
happened to
lot of
me,
time
to be fair.
for me to be able to do that. Um, with certain friendships, certain friendships have probably ended as a result of it. Um, but likewise, you grow new friendships and stuff like that. I think.
That's gonna be loud as shit. I just realised that fucking pouring is gonna be so loud. It's fine. I was gonna pour you something. I was like, no, I don't know if I'm gonna make the noise again.
That's all
Um,
right. But I don't
yeah,
think it's necessary. I mean, socially, I definitely struggle more now.
yeah,
It takes a lot more out of me. I think I'm very lucky in the sense of I acknowledge that, and as a result, I have purposely got quite a very social job to
yeah.
counteract that and try and prove to myself on a bit of a daily basis that that doesn't overcome me, if that makes any sense. Um,
I think so. Not to just relate it to myself all the
mm,
time, but
no, it is.
something that has been the case with me, and I've had people say when they met me, is like they somewhat find it hard to believe that I can feel anxious when I don't think it kind of comes out socially, right?
Mm,
So I feel like I'm fairly competent at having a conversation with someone and seeming like I'm confident, seeming like I'm comfortable.
yeah.
Um, and I feel like you're the same. Like it
Mm,
doesn't, your anxiety doesn't show with you, right? Like
mm,
that's by no means you're not experiencing it. But I think what happens is, especially for us who kind of like being social or grow up liking being social, we develop this kind of facade where we can act like we're okay, like we can kind of ignore that anxiety in our head
yeah.
and we can act in a way that makes it seem like we're not anxious.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. I think it's like the high functioning side to it, isn't it? Not to say that there sort of is anything like that, but it's like
yeah,
if you've sort of been used to experiencing that for a prolonged period of time at a from a very developmental age, then I think that it just makes it that little bit easier to sort of try and keep powering through, even
yeah,
if
and
there is a massive.
I think that's interestingly for me. I think that's what kind of broke me when my mental health got really bad. Was that I think as a teenager, like yeah, I was struggling. Yeah, I was really socially anxious. Yeah, I was a bit depressed, but like I was kind of able to do everything I wanted to do anyway. Like
Yeah,
I kind of just, as you say, I kind of just powered through. And then I got to a point where I couldn't do that. Like my mental health suddenly got so bad to the point where I was terrified of going out, like
yeah,
that kind of thing. And for me, I think a big part of how difficult that was like, like I've been able to kind of ignore it for so long. Suddenly I can't. Suddenly I'm presented with it, and I better do something about it. Otherwise, I am fucked. And that's how it felt.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, that was really difficult to deal with. But yeah, it is. I'd say it is. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because you're more inclined to not address the problems, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
If you can still function, it means that it's not so bad that it's unfunctionable, and
yeah,
I think that's the key thing is if you have something or experience something for such a long period of time, it's going to end up becoming all consuming at some point or
yeah,
another. And I think that sort of summarizes really quite what you were trying to say there.
yeah,
What you did say there is just fully. It gets to a point where like you can't like that is influencing every part of your life, and then
yeah,
you can't sort of get out of that, and it's hard. It's really hard.
yeah. I mean, this is a saying that I might have just like pulled out my ass, but an ignored problem only grows. That might be an insane saying. I've probably just read it somewhere, to be honest.
I love
But
that.
that
I'm
is
gonna take that one home.
that is generally how I feel. Like
Mm,
if you ignore something for long enough, like it will just get bigger and bigger and bigger to a point where you then have to address it. And it's
yeah.
like if you can catch it earlier, it's why this whole like conversation about like should we be having all this awareness of mental health for teenagers, right? Or for even for kids? Like should we be telling them about mental health because are they then just more inclined to feel a certain way, to feel
Yeah.
depressed, to feel anxious because they've suddenly been told about this mental health thing. Again, I think like everything is a double edged sword, but if you can catch problems early, and I think if I was able to like face my issues face on at like say 14 when they were a problem but they weren't like really a problem. If I was able to sit down and address them then and I had people like talking about mental health, then would I be struggling a whole lot more a few years later? I mean, it's an unknown, obviously.
Yeah,
Um,
it's difficult because I suppose it's also then looking at a whole different generation above us where they had no awareness,
yeah,
and a lot of them are now struggling, and you get to a point 50 years down the line where you can't really change. You know,
yeah,
you can't
which is yeah,
actively make that sort of neurological, behavioral, whatever differences which could make your lifestyle or your mental health better. Um, so, but yeah, it's the whole sort of generational thing, isn't it? It's
yeah.
two different lives, but the same sort of problem.
And you do say it, you do see it even. You see it in like parents, don't you? You see
Yeah.
that kind of like that one stubborn thing that like they're too far gone to like address it. Like
Mm.
they've grown up with the thing of like, oh, it's not a problem. I'll just power through,
Yeah.
and they've never addressed it. So therefore, there's no way that they're going to address it now. I mean, I like to think that there's still an
Yeah. Yeah.
opportunity,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I get what you mean, though.
when you've grown up with the mindset of you don't address it, you just get on with it,
Mm.
then it's really difficult. So if you were to look kind of how you grew up, and I keep it as vague as you want to keep it,
Yeah.
but was there anything that you think that might have contributed to ways of feeling, to the depression, to the anxiety, to how you manage things?
I mean, definitely like sort of the anxiety and stuff like that. Like, I mean, something that I've thought about is I've got a very what's it, intense attachment style.
Right, yeah, me too.
So I get very like yeah anxious, and that's like reflected when I was a kid with my mum.
Yeah,
Probably reflected in some friendships, and it's definitely reflected in sort of relationships. Like I literally would like the attachment is just crazy intense and
yeah,
overwhelming. Then the anxiety when you haven't got the attachment is yeah. So I think that's probably stemmed from, and this is obviously because I have a bit of a background sort of understanding anyway, but
yeah,
is from sort of single parent and stuff like that
yeah,
partially. Obviously, my mum was incredible, but there's some things that you sort of can't avoid it being
yeah,
in that situation. And she was very young parent. I think she had a lot on her shoulders, and she probably had a lot of judgment as well. I know she did, and I think, you know, unfortunately, that just does then have a big impact on sort of like the way that I was treated in school and stuff like that. Because my mum was younger, single
right,
parent was
yeah,
frowned upon and all of that back then.
yeah,
Like we were like kicked out of housing and stuff like that, all because she was so young. And also like the single parent, you know, it was harder financially. She's again been great, but we've never been in that sort of financial situation where a lot of my friends are, where they have
yeah,
that sort of financial freedom and stuff like that. So it was sort of hard growing up in that sense. Whether that had an impact directly, I don't know, but it's one of those things that sort of definitely differentiates myself and my sort of upbringing from my friends, I think.
Something I want to ask, and I guess again I'm going to preface this by the fact that I'm in no means a therapist, right? Okay,
Yeah.
and I don't want to like go digging in places that
Mm-hmm.
like there's no need to be. But do you ever wonder in terms of an anxious attachments type, in terms of maybe feeling like people might leave? Do you think there's anything to do with maybe your dad in
Yeah,
there?
yeah, definitely. It's one of those things that for me, I probably haven't like looked into it myself a whole
Okay,
amount.
I should shut up
No, no,
then.
no, no, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Because like I've spoken to a therapist about it
Yeah,
previously. It's just something that I'm sort of like, you know, I've never in the forefront in my conscious brain thought that it was a thing, but I definitely think that it is
yeah,
in that sort of unconscious layer
yeah,
of self. But definitely, I agree. And it's probably why I also struggled to like sort of have a relationship and stuff like that, and seeing again contributing to sort of like the relationship. My mum's had a lot of unfortunately not great relationships, so it's sort of growing up with that
yeah.
reflection of unfortunately how some people can be treated no matter how good or bad
Right.
they are.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense as well.
but yeah, definitely, you know. I also like love just like sliding around. So I think that just like goes with probably just being like trying to get that attention from somewhere.
Yeah.
Brutal honesty right there.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Um, yeah, I really don't want to press that too much, but let's again go back a little bit. So one thing I asked, which I then moved on to accidentally, but was the effect on relationships and the effect on work.
Yes.
So how would you say the issues you have affect work?
It's definitely one of those things where on a day-to-day basis, I don't know how I'm going to feel mood-wise.
Yeah,
Um, I work in a sales-based environment by choice. It keeps me stimulated. It keeps
yeah,
my brain working, but it is quite difficult sometimes in that environment because I don't know how I'm going to go in. So I've got to base my days around how my mood's going to be a lot of the time, off of exactly what I may need to do that day. On a sort of lower mood day, am I going to do more admin work so that doesn't require like face to face? Do you know?
yeah,
So it's definitely something that I try and do now. I try and sort of work with it, but it has meant that I've had to adapt. Previously, I've struggled quite a lot with work and my mood and my anxiety and stuff like that.
yeah,
Um, Last year, particularly, sort of took a lot of time off, taking a lot of sickness.
yeah,
Um, I was going out a lot, even just to sort of try and like get through the days and like the evenings and stuff like that.
yeah,
Um, and then I worked in a psychiatric unit, which you
yeah.
sort of
That's
said
what I was
you wanted to
gonna
touch on
move on to.
briefly.
Yeah,
And that was incredible. And I was at a really great point in my life where I wanted to do that.
yeah,
Was hoping to go into sort of forensic, well, I studied forensic mental health. So it
yeah,
was a perfect direct area to go into that. Worked on sort of male, female intensive units. And it was fantastic. It was great in the sense of it was exactly what I wanted to do.
yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, it just sort of over a year or two, it took its toll just with some of the stuff that I was seeing,
Of
some of the stuff that
course.
I was dealing with, unfortunately, with the NHS, the lack of resources, etc.,
Yeah,
etc. And it took a toll, and I just started thinking basically that I was going to go crazy. I became very fixated, like OCD fixated, just
mm,
like literally about how if I was going to go out, if I was going to drink alcohol, or theoretically, if I was going to touch any substance,
mm,
would I like? Do you know? Is that going to be me? Am I going to end up in that state in the sort
right.
of psych unit? And I got so fixated on it so much so that that was part of the reason I pretty much left.
Yeah,
It was just a bit overwhelming for me seeing a lot of that when I wasn't feeling quite on top form myself. On the flip side, amazing opportunity where I learned so much about
yeah. You
myself
do.
and sort of
Yeah,
the industry.
you
So
learn a lot, don't
hats
you?
off to it, and
Yeah,
I would never change it for the world.
yeah.
Unfortunately, we just don't live in a life where I think that I'd be able to do with that long term.
It's heavy stuff. Like
Yeah.
obviously, I work in a mental health home, but
Mm.
as I've said to you before, it's we have people who, when they get really bad, they then go back into the places that you were working,
Yeah.
right? So the people we look after are pretty independent, and they obviously have issues. They have things we have to deal with, but generally, you don't see like the worst of things. And there's been a couple of instances where it has been pretty bad, and the effect. I remember one thing happening, and I spent the next 3 days just wired, like it's just in this state of I've been put into complete shock, and I
Yeah.
was just in this state of anxiety, like pure anxiety for like 3 days, and then I took some. I mean, I think it. I say unrelated, but looking back, it probably was a bit related. But my mental health was really bad at the time anyway, so I took time off, and then I came back and went on to bank shift. um, but again, that was a situation with a woman who then went back into psychiatric hospital because she had got really bad.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't think it's heavy stuff, and I don't think personally I would be able to manage my own mental health and an intense environment like a psychiatric ward.
Yeah.
The other thing I have is that I think it'd probably be quite triggering because I spent a week in a psychiatric ward when I was 18. And I think walking into a place like that felt like that again would be just a bit
Yeah. Even
much
just
for
by
me.
association, like it's
Yeah,
they're not the nicest of places. It's sort of a
no,
last resort. Um, but I completely hear what you say, like about feeling wired, because I would come home and quite literally not be able to sleep for like days because you just like fixated on this like crazy thing. You couldn't even write some of the stuff.
I know.
It's mad.
It's
But
mental. The thing is, it's so like the route I'm going on now is trying to get a psychology degree. I want to be a therapist. Like that's my main thing. And I've always had this like real interest in mental health and psychology. And it's scary stuff, to be honest. It's shocking stuff, but at the same time it's so interesting. Like
yeah,
it's so interesting the
for
extent
sure.
to the human brain can like go, like the depths that the human brain can go. Like you learn it yourself going through mental health,
Yeah.
and then you see it in people who
Other experiences, isn't it?
yeah
And other sort of everyone's so it's such a diverse thing. I
yeah
think.
and in these cases it's quite often far more complex mental health as well, schizophrenia, psychosis,
Yeah.
and that's like a whole different wow. Okay, like I feel anxious, like my brain gets itself in fight or flight for no reason at all. I feel depressed, I feel sad, I've got no dopamine. But these people hear things, these
Yeah.
people have conversations with people who aren't there. Like there's kind of levels to it, and you realize
Intensity
that
wise, yeah,
when you
fully.
start working with people like that. And I got to say, one of the greatest things doing this job is that the thing is in psychiatric wards you don't tend to see people who are, well, I guess maybe you do, but you see less people who are like on their way to getting better and going out into the community and living
Yeah.
independently. And to be honest, you see kind of a lack of that where I work as well. But occasionally you see someone who's really progressing, someone who's getting a job, someone who's looking at
Yeah, and
moving
it's
out.
like it's amazing,
It's
isn't
a
it?
great
Yeah.
feeling, especially when you've been used to people who are struggling to the point that they're just trying to survive each day rather than trying to thrive, basically.
And that's the good. That's sort of like that's the good side of it, and
Yeah,
that's the amazing
the
side of it, and the
rewarding.
beautiful
Yeah,
side of it. That was sort of like the thing that kept me going when I was doing it. I'm sure it's sort of similar for yourself. Like when
yeah,
you get to see somebody go like walk out those doors and actually go out and live their life
yeah,
properly, it's definitely something.
yeah. It's a nice feeling. Okay, let's. Okay, so we did end up talking a bit about medication
Mm.
anyway. So you if we just go back to what you were saying before, so you said that your experience with sertraline wasn't great, but your experience with citalopram, was it
Yeah.
citalopram? Experience with citalopram, would you say overall you're happy that you went on it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. One of the main things that it highlighted to me was how I could decompartmentalize every area of my body.
yeah,
Like literally, I could sort of all those stresses and like the intense stress that I had, the overwhelming stress and dread and everything. It just gave me tunnel vision, weirdly, of just like how it meant that I could deal with every little area without getting overwhelmed, without getting
so it let you break it up. It
yeah.
let you stop looking at it as this
Rather
whole
than
entity,
this whole like pile of everything,
this
because
whole
the way I'd literally like envisage life just putting one thing on top of another on top of another,
yeah,
and I started thinking that life just had it in for me, and it was
yeah,
just like, you know what, kick you while you're down sort of thing.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
go
so
on, sorry.
that was one of the things that I just needed to. I didn't expect it to do that, but yeah, and I mean, in reflection now, it's oh my god.
So, I feel so sorry for you. I'm literally not getting attacked for some reason, and they're just crawling all over you. It's annoying because it's sending me in like laughter.
It's annoying because I can literally feel them going up my trousers.
Anyway, it's the countryside, bro.
Yeah, for real. I think though now I need to make sure that I'm doing the right thing with it. I definitely need to go back to therapy. That's one of the things, and again, unfortunately, it's just the money side of it. But once I sort of sort that out, I get back on with the therapy. I haven't done it for about 2 years, and I actually
Okay.
stopped once my relationship broke down because I couldn't think of anything worse than talking about that to
Right.
anybody.
Yeah. Fair enough.
But definitely feel ready to go back to that now. I think it would be something that I need to do alongside my medication just to get me to really where I want to be.
Yeah.
because at the moment there's definitely a little sort of side effect of like numbness.
Right.
And I didn't realize it initially, but now I've been on it for about a year. I'm sort of looking back and I'm thinking, okay, there's certain things that I probably should be a little bit more joyous about
Right.
or
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
some things about. But I look at it holistically in a big picture, and it's better than where I was. So take the L sometime.
Yeah. That's good. So can I just ask? So citalopram overall, you think it's a good thing you went on it? Did you have any issues with starting it anyway, or
When I went on it, I was already in a really really bad like sort of place anyway.
yeah,
Didn't leave my house for like a month. Just sort of stayed in bed. Couldn't really do much.
yeah,
So to be totally honest, I don't think I've noticed any difference in my mood for the first couple of weeks.
okay,
I have, however, since accidentally forgotten to take it for a
right,
prolonged period of time.
yeah.
I didn't even realise, but I just stopped for a week. Um, Partying again too
Well, I
hard.
would if I stopped mine for a week. I think I would die. To be
And
honest,
let me tell you, yeah,
was it hell? Yeah,
I thought I basically turned myself like schizophrenic.
yeah,
And I told myself that I will never do that ever again. Now I ensure that I've got an alarm. I take it every day without
yeah,
fail, like just to be on the safe side because as I started, I assume experiencing withdrawals from that.
yeah.
Um, it was horrific. Like
It's
the
scary.
physical sensations,
Yeah.
the brain zaps,
Oh
like
God, yeah.
everything.
It's scary, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
when you miss a few doses and you realise, fuck, what was it going to be like when I actually want to come off this?
well, yeah, it's definitely one of the things that I sort of think about now.
But tapering, I mean, you just got to tell yourself, like, that's cold turkey. That's you just stopping.
Yeah,
Like, the best way to come off medications is slowly reducing your dose.
yeah, because that's like what you did, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still hell to be honest. But so I'm very sensitive to medication. Like I don't think my experience is what most people's experiences are. Um, God knows why my brain's just sensitive. But
Sensitive boy.
yeah, sensitive boy. But yeah, I think most people and you will probably be all right. Just tapering off it slowly.
Yeah, and it's just about not being stupid with it. Like at the end of the day, it is like a clinical medication. Like just
Yeah,
don't be dumb.
it's a drug.
Like don't be, like because I was taking it here and taking it there, sort of initially.
Yeah.
Like if I was going out, I wouldn't take it. Like, but it's just better to keep the
Yeah.
consistency for your body, for your mind. Anyway.
Yeah, well, SSRIs, yeah, no medication, just they only really work if you're taking them consistently because they take a long time apparently to build up in your system.
Yeah.
Apparently, almost 12 months according to my doctor. When no, not 12, 12 weeks according to my doctor when I was on sertraline. 3 months to like wait.
No, 3 months.
Yeah, 3 months. No, you had me.
I did
You had
pass
me
maths.
second guessing myself. I was like, "Fuck, you proper done me on
You
my own
are
podcast,
better
mate."
at maths than me, so I just shut up.
3 months, which is a long period of time to be
Yeah.
waiting when you're really struggling. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of end off the whole thing with like things that you found helpful, and I know you've touched on it a bit,
Yeah.
but things you've said stuff like meditation, what was the other thing? Mindfulness. You've had therapy, and yeah, any other self-help things that you found helpful?
I think just as a whole, like a bit of a lifestyle change was
Yeah.
something that I needed for myself.
Me too, to be fair.
Just making sure that I am listening to my body and my mind rather than trying to push them out of their comfort zones too much
Yeah.
at times. I mean, there's not like specific sort of thing that you can do, but I just think being in tune with yourself and listening to what you need at that time. Reading really helped, and like specifically, some self help books. Like that's pretty much all I really read, and it's on like sort of brain development. I've read a fantastic one that my mum gave me, and it's on like addiction and like but addictional behaviors. So it's not sort of specific to anything.
Who's it by? Is it that guy?
a Buddhist one.
Yeah, that guy. I know who the guy is. I can't
With
remember his
that
name.
guy.
That guy. It's that guy, fam.
But that changed my life last year when my mum gave it to me, and she's
Yeah.
used it, and it was fantastic. But reading self help books just makes me feel like I'm doing something with myself. I'm trying to like better myself.
Yeah.
Another thing that I did actually that I completely didn't touch on was I started swimming, like cold water swimming,
Oh, well,
and
like Iceman.
it was
Wim Hof.
absolutely
Wim Hof
gorgeous.
Iceman.
I am the Iceman.
I
Coldest day.
I did a lot of looking into that. To be fair, I had cold showers for a while,
Yeah,
and they thing with cold showers. Like I don't know if this was what the benefit you're supposed to get from it, but like if I had a cold shower for like 2 hours afterwards, my brain would just feel like almost like nothing could touch me. Like I would just feel kind of
yeah.
content, and then it would kind of wear off. To be fair, but like
At
it
least
was
it lasted for the 2 hours. You know what I
exactly. It
mean?
was like I also got to a point with my anxiety where like it was so constant, it was so bad that I would have like a hot shower, my whole body would like heat up, my
Yeah,
heart would like kind of speed up a bit, and it'd make me more anxious. So I kept having these hot showers, and I'd come out feeling clammy and anxious
yeah.
and a bit sick.
So your
So
body's
like
like working on overdrive. I feel like sometimes like
yeah,
I'm
I
all
just
hot and bothered.
yeah exactly. So I just yeah, cold showers was quite big at that point.
It's honestly one of the best things that's helped me, and like ice baths and
Yeah,
stuff
I've
like
never had
that.
an ice
Like
bath to be fair.
amazing, amazing. And but the swimming one, obviously the exercise genuinely
Of
helped, like
course,
so
yeah,
helped. And two, the fact that I was giving myself a good routine, just like I say, lifestyle change. It
yeah,
did amazing things for me. And it's just making sure that you stick to that. Um, Countryside walking,
yeah.
always been really good for me. Um,
That's funny actually. I used to have like this mentor guy I'd go on walks with. And one of the
when was
things
that?
a couple years ago now is when I was coming off pregabalin.
Oh yeah,
One of the things he told me was that like in I can't it might have been Japan maybe. I can't remember the country, but for like depression and stuff, they would basically prescribe walks on like soil
I
because
love
apparently
that.
they believe that like
Yeah,
yeah, but like when you compact soil, there's like chemicals apparently that are like really good for you.
no way.
Yeah, that's what he told me. I mean, I
Did you
mean,
try it?
it might be out to put it. Well, we all we did was go and walk. So I things I go on, I walk my dogs every day. So like it was something I'd always done anyway. But yeah, I thought it was if it's true, it's quite a nice little fact, really.
Little facts,
Um,
tips and tricks.
but yeah, that yeah, I mean, walking, yeah, exercise, you just get out in nature and like connect to
Yeah,
nature, and that can feel really healing, really kind of.
really, really
Um,
healing. I think the fact that I live like quite close to the sea as well.
yeah,
I love going and meditating by the sea and just listening to that. Like the waves, watching the waves, and sort of
yeah,
all of that stuff. But I also did a bit of running as well, and then I'd like run to the top of a field and I'd just sit and meditate for as long as I could. Um, but yeah, I'm just normal sort of stuff like
yeah,
healthy eating,
yeah.
small things.
And
Just to
would you
keep.
say therapy was helpful?
Um,
Because that can be a mixed bag for people,
I've
can't it?
had
Really?
various different therapies. I think it depends at what level therapy you're having.
Yeah,
I've had NHS therapy, which didn't work for me personally.
neither.
Um, I then tried private therapy and it worked. I think I became very fixated on certain things.
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe. I sort of just ended up having it as a little bit of a chin wag rather than taking it as seriously as I maybe could have done because of
yeah,
where I was at. I don't know. But it's definitely something that I want to go back to because I know it's beneficial.
yeah,
You've just got to actively want to use it for what it's worth, I think.
yeah. I think it's like my experience with therapy is I think I saw about six therapists before I saw the therapist.
You know,
Who the
I
work
know
I
that you
did with
said that
her
you did it, you
was
saw it a lot.
actually amazing. And yeah, yeah, how many years? I must have done it for like 4 years, loads of
Maybe
different
even more.
therapists. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I never found it like that helpful. And then I got a therapist who was also a psychologist, so she was basically trained in like multiple different therapies. We had a session, one or two sessions, where she said, "Okay, we're gonna talk about what your issues are, and I'm gonna come up with the therapy technique that I think will help you most.
Yeah.
And in the end, she came up with EMDR, which is like
Right. Isn't it like the
eye
eye
movement,
movement
rapid.
therapy?
Yeah, but like we were doing a whole thing where it was just we're just trying to detach the feeling of panic that I got when I was like having a social situation. So I'd have to think of the situation and like put it in a box and then play like a mobile game. And like I had to be so focused on the game that basically it got to a point where I was like, I can't focus on like my brain's too like scatty to just be focusing on a mobile game. So I started playing Xbox in my sessions. So I'd literally sit down, go into a private Call of Duty lobby, like just shooting bots, just going around shooting
brilliant.
bots, and then she would take me like I'd have to pause it. She'd go, okay, come back in, open the box, just touch on it slightly, come back out, and then go back to the thing.
That's mad.
And it was just this whole like yeah, it was just detaching this feeling of panic with the situation.
That's really interesting.
And you'd have a number, like you start with a number of how that situation made you feel, like how much physical anxiety that situation gave you. And the idea was by the end of the session that you'd brought that number down from like a 10 to a 2 or something. And then obviously like when I started doing it, I was like, this is some voodoo shit. Like there's no way this is working. Like fuck this. And then I'd go into the situations that we'd like worked on, and I was like, I'm not like fully panicking. Like I'm still anxious, but it's not like
manageable.
yeah, it's manageable. And I'd be like, holy shit, this whole thing that we've done might actually be doing something.
But
and
it might actually work.
Yeah, and it literally took like several months of doing it to like have that shit is working. And once I showed myself a few times that I could do that I could deal with situations that I thought in my head felt like if I did them I would die. Like that's how it felt in my head. And I proved to myself that wasn't true a few times. And then just got into like I still struggle massively, but like I can have my brain telling me that it's the worst thing in the world to go and do this thing. But something else in my brain is now stronger and that tells me you will be fine though. Like you're struggling right now, but you will be fine.
That you need just to like get you through.
Yeah, you just as long as one voice is bigger than the like louder than the other. It's like everything with this podcast. Like I was struggling to see friends, let alone collect friends, to bring them to my house, to sit in front of a camera and film a podcast, and then drop them. Like that is such a huge step from what I was struggling to do
before. Big achievement there. I mean, I just put that out there, man.
and it's purely, it's not because I don't feel anxious about it anymore. It's because I can say to myself, you will be okay though. Like you won't be what your brain is telling you.
Yeah.
It'll be like
because your brain's just trying to trick you.
It is.
Like, and that's the thing.
It's like
your
delusion.
Your brain will literally just tell you or do whatever the fuck it wants.
Yeah.
But you just got to have that sort of level-headed mindfulness that you know you are going to be okay, and that's literally by the sounds of it what you got. That's madness, though. I didn't even know about that.
I think it's just you have to. With anxiety, you have to prove to yourself that the anxiety is just anxiety.
Yeah, that it's not you.
Yeah, and it's not right. It's not predicting the future. It's just this like nagging thought that's wrong.
Yeah, because I read something that really stuck with me, and it's like you only get anxious by the past, because it's past traumas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You get anxious of the future because it's literally just fear of the unknown. So that's both of them are completely normal, but the only time that you're not anxious is like if you're like fully present in the moment.
Which is what like mindfulness and stuff is, meditation is for.
I mean, it's stuck with me for a long time, but it works, and it's like sort of changed the way that I view it.
Yeah,
and that's all you need, isn't it?
I know. That's what I struggle with. Like staying in the moment is like I'm constantly thinking of something I've got to do tomorrow, something I've got to do the next day.
Living in your head.
Yeah, and that's why I started doing meditation. I haven't done it in a long time, to be fair, but like when I was like trying everything to try and get my anxiety better, that was one of the things. Like learn to just be in the moment, in the now, in the here, rather than thinking about all the things.
Than people think, though.
Oh, it's so difficult, mate. You're trying to train your brain to do something that's learned over your whole life.
Yeah.
Which is like that's not a quick process in the slightest.
No.
And yeah.
It's one of those brain things, isn't it? It's like untying the brain.
Yeah, it is. It's just psychology. It's all very interesting.
Yeah, I love it.
But yeah, I think to be honest, that's a great place to wrap it up. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about specifically?
No, I don't think so. I think
No.
I've managed to cover quite a lot.
Sweet. Oh, that's good. It's been really good.
No, thank you for having me. It's
Yeah,
been lovely.
thank you for coming on.